What would you do if your only son passed away and his rich boss called you late at night, saying he had found something and you must not tell your daughter-in-law? How would you feel walking into a glass office tower in your old jacket, hearing that whatever took your son's peace might now ruin you too? When I saw what was on that screen, I did not feel anger. I felt clear, cold fear. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Robert Kane, and on the day my only son was laid to rest, I felt like a visitor in a story that was supposed to be mine. The church hall still smells to me like cheap coffee and cleaning spray. There are folding chairs, paper cups, and little plates of dry cookies on a long white table. People talk in soft voices and try not to look too happy or too sad. Someone put a big photo of Lucas on an easel near the wall. He is smiling in that picture, in a sharp shirt, eyes bright. He looks like he is about to say something funny to me. I stand near the coffee table because it gives my hands something to do. I have one hand around a paper cup and the other around the back of a metal chair. I nod when people come up to me. Old neighbors, someone from my old building site, a cousin I have not seen in years. They tell me they are sorry. I tell them I know they mean well. I try to keep my face calm so they do not have to comfort me. Closer to the front of the room, the good suits stand in a tight circle. These are Sarah's family and the company people. I see her father, Leonard Cross, with his perfect tie and perfect silver hair. He has one hand on Sarah's shoulder and the other in his pocket, like he is at a business lunch, not a memorial for his son-in-law. Around him are men from the firm and from some investment group. I can tell by the way they stand, like they own every room they enter. Sarah is there too, in a black dress, holding little Noah on her hip. She looks very composed. Even from across the room, I can see her makeup is perfect. Her eyes are red but dry. She leans toward her father while he talks, like there is a cord between them and he is the one holding it. I wait for her to see me. When she finally turns her head, she raises her hand in a small wave, more like she is waving at a coworker across a meeting room than at the man who raised Lucas alone. I give her a little smile. It feels weak on my face. Someone tells me Leonard just said a few words about how Lucas was lucky to marry into a stable family and how the company will make sure Noah has a bright future. I was in the hallway at that time, fixing my tie and trying to slow down my breathing. I have not been asked to speak. I know this because the woman from the church came to me earlier and said she heard I did not want to say anything today. I never said that, but apparently someone else did on my behalf. I swallow the cold coffee. It tastes like cardboard and water. One of Leonard's friends passes by and gives me a quick nod. He does not stop. I am close enough to hear the low hum of the business talk in that circle. They talk about projects Lucas worked on, about numbers, about how strong the company will stand after this hard time. The way they say his name sounds like a line on a report. A man from my old crew, Eddie, comes over. He shifts his weight from one foot to the other, then says he is sorry they did not let me speak up there, that he thought I would say something. I tell him that it is fine, that Sarah has a lot to handle, and it is easier for her this way. I say that sometimes it is better to stay quiet and not make a scene. He looks at me like he wants to argue, but he just pats my arm once and goes to refill his cup. When I look again toward the front, I see Leonard with his hand on Noah's back, saying something to the group. One of the board members laughs softly at a remark. It is not mean laughter, just polite. Still, it scrapes against my nerves. My grandson is on that man's hip, my son's photograph is behind him on the wall, and I am standing by the coffee pot like I came here to help clean up. At some point, the small talk starts to fade and people begin to collect their coats. There is a plan for the burial and then for a smaller gathering at Sarah's parents' house. No one asks me what I will do after. A cousin comes over and says that if I ever want company, I should come by. She also says she is sorry I was not the one up front talking about Lucas's childhood, because she remembers how I used to bring him to family barbecues and how proud I was. She says it quickly, and her eyes flick toward Leonard. I can tell she does not want anyone to hear her say it. Outside, the air in the cemetery parking lot is cold and a little wet. The ground is soft under my shoes. Rows of dark cars are lined up near the path. People stand around in clusters, collars folded up against the wind. I pull my old coat tighter around me and walk toward my truck. It looks out of place between the shiny black sedans and luxury SUVs. Sarah and Leonard get into a long black car with tinted windows. Noah is in a small suit and tiny shoes. Someone carries him to the car seat. I catch one more quick look at his round face before the door closes. Sarah does not look over. Or maybe she does, and just does not see me. I am not sure which is worse. A younger man from the church. Someone helping with parking walks past me and gives me a quiet nod. He says he hopes I have someone to be with tonight. I tell him I will be fine. People always feel better when I tell them that. I sit in my truck for a while after most of the cars have left. The wipers move across the windshield even though there is almost no rain. I keep them on because the sound occupies my ears. My hands rest on the steering wheel. They look older than I remember, the skin thin and marked from years of carrying tools and lifting boards. I think about Lucas's hands, how strong and sure they were when he helped me in my garage as a teenager. On the drive home, I keep the radio off. I follow the same streets I have driven for decades. Houses pass by my window with their porches and their small front yards. Some have lights on. Inside, people are eating dinner or watching television, living ordinary evenings. I feel like I am outside of time, sliding next to them, but not part of the same world. My living room feels even smaller than usual when I walk in. I hang my coat on the back of the chair and sit on the old couch. There is a framed photo of Lucas on the shelf above the TV. It is not as fancy as the big picture in the church hall, just a snapshot from a barbecue. He has a paper plate in his hand and sauce on his cheek. He is laughing at something I said. I look at that photo a long time. My phone vibrates in my pocket. I take it out and see the family group chat lighting up. Sarah has posted pictures from the service. She writes that it was a beautiful day and that she is thankful for everyone who came. People comment with heart emojis and kind words. A few relatives tag me in their messages, saying that I raised a good man. I type a simple reply that I appreciate everyone's support. Then I stop myself and erase it. No one needs to hear from me right now, I tell myself. They are focused on her, on Noah, on the future. I scroll up in the chat and see a message from Sarah sent earlier in the week. She had written that she needs time and space, that handling documents and plans is easier if there are not too many voices, and that she will let me know when it is a good moment for visits with Noah. She added that her father and his team will take care of the money side and that I should not worry about it, since it is complex stuff. At the time I answered that I trust her. I thought she was overwhelmed and just trying to organize things. Now, with the echo of the church hall still in my ears, those words feel heavier. Too many voices. Complex stuff. I know those phrases. I heard them on building sites when someone wanted to keep workers out of talks about budget cuts and delays. They sound polite, but they are really a way to close a door. The room is very quiet. The old clock on the wall ticks loudly. I realize I am sitting in the exact same spot where I sat the night Lucas called to tell me about his promotion. He had been so excited. He said he would be working closer with the partners, that Leonard was pushing his name forward, that this would give him a real seat at the table. I remember thinking that a seat at that table might come with a price. I did not know how high it would be. I lean back and rub my face with both hands. I feel tired in a way that does not sit only in the muscles. It is deeper, like someone has added weights inside my ribs. Then my phone vibrates again, this time with a number I do not know. For a second, I consider letting it ring out. People have been calling all week, and I do not have more polite words left in me. But something about this call feels different. Maybe it is the way the number looks, long and strange, like an office line. I press accept and hold the phone to my ear. A man's voice comes through, formal at first, then more direct when he hears my name. He tells me he is Harold Benton, my son's boss from the company. He says he is sorry we have not met in person before. Then he says he has been looking at some documents linked to Lucas's projects, and he has found things that worry him. He explains, in a careful tone, that my own name appears on several big guarantees and accounts. He says that, according to the system, I agreed to back certain risky projects. He says that if these papers are real, I could lose a lot if those projects go wrong. He also says that some of the dates and approvals around these documents do not make sense, and that Lucas might have started to question them before things changed. I listen in silence. I feel my fingers tighten around the phone. My first thought is that there must be some mistake. I tell him I never signed anything like that. I am a retired foreman, not an investor. I have my small house and my pension, that is all. On the other end, Harold remains calm. He says that is exactly why he is calling me. He says he does not want to speak about this with Sarah yet, or with Leonard. He tells me directly that he thinks I could be in real trouble if we do not clear this up. Then he asks me to come to the office as soon as possible, even tonight if I can, and he asks me not to tell my daughter-in-law about this call. When the call ended, I stayed sitting on the couch with the phone still in my hand. The room was quiet again, but it felt different now. A moment before, my world was only grief and silence. Now there was something else in it, a problem with numbers and papers that had my name on them, and a man I barely knew telling me I could lose everything. I put the phone on the table and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Part of me wanted to ignore it all, go to bed, and hope it was some kind of mistake that would fix itself. But I knew better. Mistakes with money and signatures do not fix themselves. And Harold did not sound like a person who panics easily. His voice had been careful and steady. That worried me more than if he had sounded upset. I looked up at Lucas's photo on the shelf. In the picture, he was still in college, wearing an old jacket of mine. He had borrowed it for some event and never gave it back. His hair was a little too long, his smile a little too wide. I remembered that day very clearly, and my mind started to walk backward through time, away from this empty living room and back to when all this had seemed simple. When Lucas was little, it was just the two of us in a small rental near the highway. I worked long days on construction sites and picked up side jobs on weekends. He spent a lot of time with old toys and school books at the kitchen table while I fixed broken chairs or cleaned tools. I was not a perfect father, but I was always there. I never missed a school play if I could help it. I went to every parent meeting even when I arrived with dirt on my boots. He was good with numbers from a young age. When I checked my pay stubs at the table, he would look at the figures and ask questions. I would joke that he should become an accountant so he could explain my own pay to me. He would laugh and say he wanted to do something bigger than that. I did not know what bigger meant back then. I thought maybe he would be a site manager or an engineer. In high school, he got serious about his classes. The teachers started to use words like scholarship and potential. One afternoon, his math teacher pulled me aside and said Lucas should apply to a good business school, that he had a mind for planning and strategy. I remember standing in the hallway in my faded work jacket, listening to that teacher talk about opportunity and networks, and feeling both proud and a little scared. Those were not words from my world. We managed to get him into a decent university. I worked extra shifts, and he took some aide and part-time work. He called home once or twice a week, telling me about lectures, group projects, and the big new city around him. He often said he did not want me to worry about money, but I always did. I kept a small notebook where I tracked every bill and every transfer I sent him. It was my way of having a tiny bit of control. During his last year, he told me he had landed an internship at a real estate development company. He sounded very excited. He said it was not just about houses, but about big projects that changed whole parts of the city. Office towers, shopping complexes, shiny new streets. He said there were partners, investors, and complex deals. He seemed proud to be in the middle of all that, even as a small intern. That was when I first heard the name Leonard Cross. Lucas called one evening and told me he had met a senior investor who also happened to be the father of a young woman he really liked. He described Leonard as impressive and well-connected. Then he talked about the woman herself, Sarah. He said she was smart, organized, and came from a very different world than ours. He laughed when he told me she had never set foot on a construction site and that I would probably scare her with my old tools. The first time I met Sarah was at my little house. Lucas brought her over for dinner. I cooked simple food and tried not to show how nervous I was. She was polite and careful with her words. She looked around the living room in a friendly way, but I could see she was not used to this kind of place. Her clothes, her watch, even the way she held her fork, all told me she came from money. That is not a crime, but it creates a distance. She asked me about my work and listened with a small smile. She said Lucas talked a lot about how hard I had worked for him. I liked that. But when the evening was over and they left, I sat alone in the quiet and felt that something had changed. It was not just Lucas having a girlfriend. It was him stepping into a life where my experience did not count for much. I met Leonard a few months later. Lucas invited me to a dinner at a small but fancy restaurant. When I walked in, I saw tables with candles and cloth napkins. I felt out of place in my best but still plain shirt. Leonard stood up to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his smile perfect, like a man in a brochure. He spoke in a smooth way about how proud I must be, how Lucas had a bright future at the firm. At the end of the meal, when the bill came, Leonard took it without even looking at the total. He slipped his card out and made a small joke that now that Lucas was with their family, I could relax and not worry about the big numbers anymore, because this level of game is for people like us. He said it with humor, but I felt the line under the joke. People like us, people like me. The categories were clear. I laughed along to be polite. I told him I was just glad Lucas had good people around him. On the way home, though, I sat on the bus and stared out the window, thinking about that sentence. I wanted my son to have opportunities, but I did not want him to feel like he had to pay for them with his integrity. As time went by, Lucas moved into a new apartment closer to the city center. Leonard helped them with the down payment. Sarah called it a gift for the young family. There was some kind of trust involved, some structure where parts of the property did not really belong to them in a simple way. They tried to explain it. I nodded and pretended to understand, but the truth was that all those terms went over my head. When Noah was born, the hospital room was full of Sarah's relatives. People brought big baskets, balloons, designer baby clothes. I came with a small stuffed animal and a blanket that my sister had knitted. I held my grandson for a short time, and then the nurse said there were too many people and we had to step out. In the hallway, I heard Leonard talk about setting up a fund and making sure Noah's future was fully secured, and someone joked that now there was no need to worry about old-fashioned savings accounts. I did not say anything. I just held my coat and listened, feeling the distance between us grow wider. Little by little, the pattern became clear, even if I tried not to see it. Family gatherings were mostly at Leonard's house or at upscale places he liked. When I arrived, I often felt like a guest who did not quite fit. People talked about markets, travel, and projects. If I mentioned something from my old working life, they smiled kindly and moved the talk back to their topics. Sarah sometimes told me not to worry about this or that because Dad has it covered. She said that about Noah's education, about their apartment, about holidays. At first it sounded comforting. After a while it started to sound like there was no place left where my help or my opinion mattered. One afternoon, not long before everything changed, Lucas came to my house alone. We sat in the garage, the way we used to when he was a teenager, helping me fix things. He looked tired. Not just physically, but tired behind the eyes. He told me work was intense, that he was on big projects with tight deadlines. He said Leonard was involved in some deals through separate companies, and that some of the paperwork made him uneasy. He talked about quick land transfers, about partners who came and went fast, about documents with sums so large they did not feel real. He kept saying he was sure it was legal, but that he did not like the pressure. He said he had tried to raise a small concern about timing on one project and was told he was overthinking and should trust the process. He gave a short, humorless laugh when he repeated those phrases. I asked him if he had spoken directly to Harold or to someone in human resources. He said he did not want to look disloyal. He said Leonard had opened so many doors for him and that Sarah would be upset if she thought he did not trust her father. He said he just needed to push through for a few months and then things would settle down. I remember sitting on the broken stool in the garage, wiping my hands on a rag and wanting to tell him to walk away, to find something simpler, even if it paid less. But I also remembered how proud he had been of his promotion, how he had talked about finally giving Noah a life without worry. So I only said that if something did not feel right, he should listen to that feeling and be careful with anything he signed. He nodded, but I could see he had already decided to stay where he was. Now, sitting alone in my living room after the call from Harold, those moments came back with painful clarity. All the small times when I had felt like a bystander. All the times Lucas had tried to balance two worlds. I stood up slowly and went to the old wooden cabinet by the hallway. That was where I kept spare keys, some letters, and things I did not know where else to put. I opened the top drawer to look for my car keys. Under a pile of old envelopes and a small screwdriver, I saw an envelope with my name written on it in neat, familiar handwriting. It was Lucas's writing. My stomach tightened. I picked it up with careful fingers. On the front, it said Dad in the top corner. Under that, in smaller letters, it said, "For Mr. Benton, if something happens." I read that line twice. The room seemed to press in closer around me. I turned the envelope over and saw that it had been sealed, then opened at some point, then sealed again with a strip of clear tape. I did not remember ever seeing it before. My hands felt a little unsteady as I held it, but my mind was very clear. Lucas had wanted this to reach Harold if things went wrong. I walked back to the couch, sat down, and placed the envelope on the table next to my phone. For a long moment, I just looked at it, the thin paper between me and whatever my son had tried to leave behind. My name is Robert Kane, and that night, after everyone went home and the messages slowed down, I sat alone with the envelope on the table and felt like the house was holding its breath with me. The envelope was thin, but it felt heavy in my hand. I turned it over again and again. My name was on the front in Lucas's writing, and that small line under it about Mr. Benton if something happened. He had written that calmly, like he was planning a normal task. I tried to picture him standing at my cabinet, sliding this into the drawer, deciding not to hand it to me directly. That thought hurt more than anything inside the paper could. I slid a finger under the edge of the tape and peeled it back. The sound of the paper opening was loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. I unfolded it and saw his writing, a little rushed, but still neat. It was not long, but every line seemed to carry weight. He had written that if I was reading this, then things at work had moved in a direction he did not like. He explained that he had seen my name attached to certain files in the office system, linked to projects that felt wrong to him. He wrote that he had started a small internal report and saved copies of some records, but that he did not know how far it would go. He wrote that he trusted his direct boss, Harold, more than he trusted some of the people above him. He also wrote that I should not sign anything I did not fully understand, especially if it came through Leonard or his lawyers. He reminded me, in a careful way, that my house and my pension were the only things I had, and that once I put them under someone else's risk, I might never get them back. At the end, he wrote that he was sorry he had brought me even close to any of this. I read that page 3 times. By the third time, my hands had stopped shaking. My mind felt strangely clear. There was pain, of course. There was always pain now. But there was also something else, a quiet line inside me that straightened. For the first time since the service, I did not feel like I was just drifting from moment to moment. I folded the note carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I rose from the couch and went down the small hallway to my bedroom. I opened the old wardrobe and pulled out my better coat. The fabric was worn but cleaned. I checked my pockets for my wallet and keys, then looked at myself in the mirror. The man in the reflection had gray at the temples and tired eyes, but he also had a jaw that was set a little firmer than before. Back in the living room, I picked up my phone and checked the time. It was late, but Harold had asked me to come even tonight if I could. I did not want to give fear any more hours to grow. I called him back. When he answered, I told him I had seen something my son left behind and that I would come now if he was still there. He said he would wait and that security would have my name. The streets were mostly empty when I drove out. The city lights made the low clouds glow with a dull orange tint. I followed the route deliberately, one turn after another, like I was following a line drawn years ago and only now understood where it led. The closer I got to the business district, the taller the buildings became. Glass and metal cut into the night sky, shining with office lights that were still on. Harold's company tower rose above the others on that block. It was all glass and sharp corners with a bright logo near the top. I pulled my truck into the visitor section and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The building looked like something from Lucas's world, not mine. Inside that place, people spoke a language of deals and returns. In my world, a mistake meant a crooked wall. In theirs, it could mean losing everything quietly on a piece of paper. I got out, locked the truck, and walked toward the entrance. The revolving door made a soft whooshing sound as I stepped through. The lobby floor shone like water. There were tall plants in silver pots, a long reception desk, and a security guard in a neat uniform. On one side, large photos hung on the wall of finished projects. Towers, shopping centers, wide plazas filled with smiling people. The guard looked up as I approached. He asked for my name and checked a list on his screen. Then he nodded and handed me a visitor badge with my name and a time stamp on it. He told me, in a respectful tone, that Mr. Benton's office was on one of the upper floors and that a lift was already unlocked for me. He did not say anything else, but in his eyes I saw the same cautious curiosity I had seen from others that week. People knew something was wrong, but not exactly what. In the lift, I watched the numbers climb. My reflection looked small in the mirror. I thought about all the times Lucas had probably ridden this same lift, talking about plans with coworkers, unaware of where it would all lead. When the lift doors opened, a quiet corridor stretched out in front of me. It was lined with glass walls and closed doors. At the end, an older man stood waiting. He wore a suit, but his jacket was open and his tie was loosened a little. I recognized him from photos Lucas had shown me. This was Harold. He greeted me with a firm handshake and guided me into his office. It was large, with a wide window over the city. On the desk, a computer screen glowed, and several paper folders were stacked in a neat row. There was a photo of Lucas on a side table, one from a company event. Seeing my son smiling in this stranger's office made my chest tighten again. Harold spoke in a calm voice. He said he was again sorry for my loss, and that he wished our first real meeting was under better circumstances. Then he explained why he had called me. He said that after Lucas's passing, certain projects had been reviewed as part of routine checks. During those checks, the accounting team had found large guarantees and credit lines with my name listed as co-signer. He turned the screen slightly so I could see. My name appeared there in block letters, attached to numbers that did not fit any life I knew. Next to my name were the words of some company I had never heard of, with long strings of numbers beside it. He clicked through a few pages and showed me that the system treated me as a person who had agreed to back these projects personally. I told him, as clearly as I could, that I had never signed anything like that. I said I had never even been in this building before. He listened without interrupting. Then he said that this matched his suspicion. He explained that the dates and access logs for some of these entries did not line up with times when Lucas or I could have been involved. Some of them had been created when Lucas was on leave and I was at home. Some edits seemed to have been made after he was no longer here. He also told me that an internal report had been opened by Lucas some weeks earlier. The report had not gone far at first, but when Lucas was gone and these strange entries showed up, the system connected them and flagged his old report again. That was how the material had landed on his desk. He said that Lucas had expressed concern about pressure to approve unusual guarantees and about outside companies with ties to certain investors. He did not say Leonard's name outright, but the way his eyes shifted told me he did not have to. Harold admitted that he had protected himself and the firm by making sure his own approval was limited on those projects. He said he was not calling me out of kindness alone. If this matter turned into something bigger, regulators or the bank might see my name and assume I had agreed willingly. That would make me responsible on paper. He told me that I needed to contest this as soon as possible, that I should not sign anything new, and that I should speak to an independent lawyer who was not linked to Leonard's circle. As he spoke, I felt something inside me slowly change. The grief was still there, but it was no longer the only thing. There was a new line in my mind, a firm one. I realized that all those years of being on the edges of conversations, all those times when people told me that things were complex and I should not worry, had trained me to accept whatever was handed to me. Now I saw where that habit could lead. I asked him if he had copies of whatever showed my name. He said he would prepare printouts and digital records, but that I needed to be careful about what I did with them until I had proper advice. He mentioned that internal teams were also looking into the pattern and that he had alerted the compliance department quietly. He said he did not want to start a storm without being sure of the facts, but he could not ignore what he had seen. For a moment, we both looked at the screen in silence. My name stayed there, cold and black, next to numbers that could crush a man like me without a sound. I thought about my small house, my pension, the little bit of savings I had put away in a simple account. The idea that someone had used my name without my knowledge turned it into a tool for their own game, lit something steady and hard inside me. I told Harold that my son had left a note mentioning him and warning me about Leonard. I did not show it yet, but I said that Lucas trusted him more than most people at the firm. I saw a brief change in his face, as if the weight on his shoulders shifted slightly. He nodded and said he had always thought Lucas had a good sense for people and that he would do what he could to bring the truth forward as long as we stayed careful and within the proper channels. When I left his office, he walked me back to the lift. The corridor was even quieter now. Somewhere far below, cleaning staff moved through the building. The city outside the glass seemed very distant, like a picture. I stepped into the lift and watched the doors close over Harold's serious face. In the lobby, the security guard gave me a small, sympathetic smile as I handed back the badge. I walked out into the cold night air and stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the tower. Lucas had climbed many steps in that place. He had wanted to give his family a better life, and someone had decided that my simple name, written in neat letters, could be part of their safety net. Back home, I did not go straight to bed. Instead, I went into my garage workshop and turned on the old fluorescent light. The buzzing sound filled the space. Dusty tools hung on the wall. A half-fixed chair sat in the corner. On the workbench, I laid out the envelope with Lucas's note, my small financial notebook, and a blank pad of paper. I read the note again and then began to write. I wrote down dates I could remember, when Lucas told me about his promotion, when he moved into the new apartment, when Noah was born, when I heard certain phrases from Leonard and Sarah. I tried to build a simple line of events, even if it was only for myself. I wrote in block letters like I used to do when marking wood for cutting. Clear, straight, not easy to misread. As I wrote, I felt my breathing slow and deepen. I was not a lawyer or a partner or a board member. But I knew how to follow a sequence, how to notice when something did not fit. That skill had kept people safe on sites for years. Maybe it could keep me safe now. At some point, the night grew very late. The cold from the concrete floor crept up through my shoes. I gathered the papers into a single folder and put Lucas's note in the front, where I could reach it easily. I turned off the light and stood in the dark for a few seconds, listening to the quiet. When I stepped back into the house, the glow from my phone caught my eye. It was lying on the kitchen counter, screen facing up. A new message had arrived while I was in the garage. It was from Sarah. The message from Sarah was short. She wrote that Leonard's lawyer had some papers ready for me. She said it was just to settle a few things for Noah's future and for the estate. She asked me to come to their place the next afternoon. At the end, she added that it would help everyone move on. I read it twice. There was nothing rude in the words. It was all polite and smooth. But after the talk with Harold and the note from Lucas, every line seemed to have a second meaning. Move on, settle, for Noah's future. I thought about how many times people had used phrases like that around me to hide what was really going on. I wrote back that I would come. That night I slept badly. My mind kept jumping between memories of Lucas as a boy and the image of my name on the screen in Harold's office. I woke up early before the alarm and made coffee just to have something hot in my hands. Then I sat at the kitchen table and read Lucas's note again. His words about not signing anything without understanding it felt like he was standing over my shoulder. Before I left the house, I picked up the simple folder I had started in the garage. Inside were the timeline I had written, a copy of my pension statement, my home loan papers, and Lucas's note. I did not know yet how these would fit together, but I knew I did not want to walk into Leonard's world with empty hands and an empty mind like I had in the past. Sarah's condo was in a tall glass tower with a doorman, the kind of place where the lobby looks like a hotel. When I walked in, the man at the desk asked my name and called upstairs to confirm. Then he waved me to the lift with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. I could almost feel him putting me into a category in his head. Older visitor, not from here, not important. The lift opened directly into their floor. When the doors slid aside, I stepped into a wide hallway with soft carpet and quiet air. Sarah opened the front door before I could knock. She gave me a careful hug, just touching my shoulder, then stepped back and said she was glad I came. Her face was calm, but there was a tightness around her mouth. Inside, the living room looked like something from a design magazine. Big windows, light furniture, art pieces I did not recognize. Noah was in a playpen near the window with some toys. He looked over at me, then back at his blocks. In one corner of the room, a man in a dark suit stood beside a low table. Papers were spread out in neat piles, with little colored flags marking spots. Sarah led me over. She introduced the man as her father's lawyer. He shook my hand and said he was sorry for my loss. His voice was smooth, like Leonard's, but a little colder. He explained that they had prepared some documents to simplify matters and make sure Noah's future and the family assets were structured properly. He said they wanted to clean up a few open points. He talked about consolidation, guarantees, and harmonizing obligations. The words rolled over me in a practiced flow. I listened quietly and did not let my eyes glaze over the way they used to. Each time he used a big word, I tried to think what it would mean on a building site. Consolidation to me meant pressing things together until they could not move. Guarantees meant someone would take a hit if things went wrong. He pointed with his pen at a page where my name appeared. He said it was just confirming existing arrangements and giving the company flexibility. He said it would make me part of the secure plan, not outside it. He said it would show unity to banks and partners. Sarah nodded along and told me it was all in everyone's best interest. I picked up that page and brought it closer. There was my name again in block letters. Under it, small print about being responsible if certain loans were not repaid. The date at the top was from months before, around the time Lucas had come to my garage looking tired. My signature was on the line at the bottom, except it was not. It looked like my writing, but the curve of one letter was wrong. The spacing was a little strange. At first glance, it was good enough to fool someone, but I knew my own hand. I had signed my name on hundreds of timesheets and delivery slips. I could see the difference. I kept my face calm. I did not say what I had noticed. Instead, I told them I did not feel comfortable signing anything new today. I said I was tired and that my mind was not clear enough yet for such things. I said it would be better if I took the documents home and read them in peace. The lawyer gave a small, polite smile and said that was understandable, but they wanted to finalize things soon. Sarah added that it would give her peace of mind if everything was sorted. I repeated that I needed time. This time, I let a little steel into my voice. Not anger, just firmness. The lawyer studied me for a second, then nodded and said, of course, it was wise to read everything. He began to gather the pages into sets and place them in a big envelope. I noticed his movements were a little faster now, like he wanted to get through this part. While he did that, I walked over to Noah. I bent down and said hello in a soft voice. He held up a toy car and pushed it toward my hand. I rolled it back to him. For a moment, it was just the two of us, and the air around us felt normal. Then I heard Sarah behind me asking if I needed any help with the documents, if I wanted her to go over them with me later. I told her I would manage. At the door, as I was leaving, she touched my arm and said she hoped I trusted that her father knew what he was doing. She said he had always kept their family safe. I answered that I understood her loyalty and that I wanted what was best for Noah too, but that I also had to protect the things I had worked for all my life. She looked at me with a mix of confusion and slight annoyance, like she could not see the danger that was so clear to me now. Outside, in the bright daylight, I stood for a second on the sidewalk holding the heavy envelope. Cars passed by, people walked their dogs, life moved on as if nothing strange was happening. I took a deep breath and headed for the bus stop instead of my truck. On the way, I took out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Angela Ruiz. Angela had helped my union years ago when our company tried to cut benefits. She was sharp and fair, and she had once said that if I ever needed help, I could call. I had almost erased her number several times, thinking I would never need a lawyer again. Now I was glad I had not. When she answered, I told her who I was and reminded her of our old case. She remembered at once and asked how I was. I told her, in simple words, that my son was gone, that there were strange documents with my name on them, and that people linked to my daughter-in-law's family were pushing me to sign more. I kept my voice steady. She listened without interrupting, then told me to come by her office the same afternoon and to bring everything I had. Her office was in an older building in a quieter part of town. The waiting room was small, with plain chairs and a pot plant that had seen better days. A young assistant asked my name and showed me in after a few minutes. Angela stood up from behind a desk piled with folders. She had more lines on her face than last time I saw her, but the same clear eyes. We shook hands and sat. I placed the envelope from Leonard's lawyer on her desk, along with my own small folder. I began with Lucas's note, then told her about Harold's call, the visit to the company tower, and the meeting at Sarah's condo. I did not rush. I laid it out the way I would explain a work problem, in order, with details. Angela read the note slowly. Then she opened the envelope from the condo and started going through the pages. She underlined some lines with a pencil, made small marks in the margins. Sometimes she paused and looked at me to confirm a date or a name. I answered as clearly as I could. She put one page beside my old home loan papers and looked at my signatures. Then she held up the copy from the so-called guarantee. She pointed out small differences. The angle of a letter. The way I wrote my last name. She did not say the word I was thinking in my head, but we were both looking at the same truth. She explained in careful terms that if these documents stood without challenge, I could be held responsible for huge sums. She said it did not matter that I had never meant to agree. On paper, on the surface, it would look like I had. She added that the links between these guarantees and companies tied to Leonard's network were very clear. She told me I had done the right thing by not signing anything new. She said the first step would be to gather every record, messages from Sarah, any letters, bank statements, anything from the company. She said we would need to create a solid file showing that I lacked knowledge and that there were signs of manipulation. She also said we should be ready for resistance, for people to act offended that I dared to question them. As we talked, I felt something like a quiet plan begin to form, even though I did not yet know its full shape. Angela was not dramatic. She did not promise miracles. She only talked about steps, filings, timelines. That calm, practical tone was like standing on firm ground again. When I left her office, I went straight to the bank where I kept my modest account. I asked to speak to the branch manager, not just the clerk, at the counter. After a short wait, a man in a shirt and tie led me to a small glass cubicle. He smiled the trained smile of someone who deals with complaints all day. I told him I needed to know if there were any loans, lines of credit, or guarantees in my name beyond my house and my simple card. At first he nodded like this was a normal request. Then he started typing in my details. The more he clicked, the more his expression tightened. He asked me to wait a moment and stepped out with a printout in his hand. When he came back, he had a different tone. He told me, in formal phrases, that there were indeed large credit lines where I was listed as cosigner. He said these had been processed through corporate channels and linked to development entities. He added that they were not managed by this small branch, but the system showed my name again and again next to high numbers. I asked if there were original forms with my signature. He said those would be stored in digital form and possibly in a central archive. He could not show them to me without higher approval. He suggested I contact the corporate desk. I told him I just wanted a simple statement showing what the system believed about me. He hesitated, then printed a summary and handed it over, saying he was not allowed to give advice, but that I should speak to a legal professional. I left the bank with that printout tucked into my folder. The paper felt thin, but it carried weight like metal. It showed, in simple lines, that the world of money already thought I was tied to debts I had never agreed to. On the bus ride home, I sat by the window with the folder on my lap. I thought about Lucas trying to balance his love for Sarah and his respect for me. I thought about Leonard talking about big numbers and laughing while I forced myself to smile. I thought about the way Sarah had told me not to worry, that things were too complex for me. Back at my house, I placed all the new pages on the kitchen table. I put Lucas's note at the top, then the bank summary, then copies of the documents from the condo. I took out my phone and started scrolling through old messages from Sarah and Leonard. Any time they had pushed me to trust them with paperwork, I took a screenshot and saved it in a separate folder. The pile on the table grew slowly. It was not a plan yet. It was not revenge or victory. It was just truth, gathered one small piece at a time. The pile on my kitchen table stayed there for days. Each time I walked past, I added something, a printed message, a small note with a date, a memory I wrote down before it could fade. It looked messy, but in my head it was starting to form a line. Angela called me 2 days after I first met her. She said she had gone through the documents and wanted to move forward. Her voice was calm, but there was a clear edge of focus now. She asked if I could get any work emails from Lucas's old projects. I told her I did not have access to that, but maybe someone at the company would. That made me think of Jason. Jason Lim had been Lucas's friend at work. I had met him once at a barbecue. He was a quiet man with round glasses and a nervous laugh. He and Lucas had spent half that day talking about some project launch. When I looked at Lucas's social media, Jason's name came up a lot under posts related to the firm. I still had his number in my phone from that barbecue day. I stared at it for a long time before pressing call. When he picked up, I could hear office noises in the background. I said my name, and there was a pause. Then he said he was very sorry, and that he had thought about calling me but did not know what to say. I told him he did not have to say anything about that. I told him I needed his help with something connected to Lucas's work. His voice dropped a little. He said we should not talk in detail on the phone. He suggested we meet somewhere open, away from the office and away from Leonard's usual places. We agreed on the park by the river the next morning. The next day was cold but bright. At the park, the trees were bare and the wind came straight off the water. I sat on a bench with my hands deep in my pockets. Parents pushed strollers along the path. Runners passed by with headphones on. It was a normal weekday morning for everyone else. Jason arrived in a dark coat, looking around more than he needed to. When he reached me, he sat at the far end of the bench and gave a small nod. He looked thinner than I remembered. His eyes had shadows under them. We talked a little about Lucas at first. Jason said the office felt strange without him. He said Lucas had been the one who listened when others were too busy. I thanked him for saying that. Then I told him, in simple terms, about the guarantees with my name, about Lucas's note, about my meeting with Harold and Angela. Jason pushed his hands deeper into his coat and stared at the river for a long moment. Then he told me that on the shared project drive there had been a folder where Lucas stored his own notes and export files. It was not in the main structure. You had to know where to look. After Lucas was gone, that folder had disappeared. Jason thought someone with higher access had removed it. He said he thought things were off even before that. He had noticed that certain approvals and financial statements moved through without normal review. He knew that some of those matters were tied to outside companies that had contact with Leonard. He also had seen a ticket in the internal system, created by Lucas, asking for a review of unusual guarantees and family-related pressure. After Lucas was gone, that ticket was marked as resolved, but nobody he knew had actually worked on it. Jason said he had taken screenshots of some items because he felt uneasy. At the time, he did not know what to do with them. Now talking to me, he said he did not want to carry that weight alone anymore. He pulled his phone out, opened a secure folder, and showed me a few images. On the small screen, I saw lists of transactions, with my name in a column next to company codes I did not recognize. I saw parts of an internal message from Lucas about needing guidance on conflicts of interest. I saw a log showing that a user with high-level access had deleted a folder with Lucas's initials in the name. Jason asked if I trusted Angela. I told him I did. He nodded and said he would send the screenshots and files to a secure email she would choose, not to me. He said he needed some kind of record that he had shared this with a legal person in case things turned ugly. He did not want to be seen as part of anything wrong. I told him I understood. I said I was grateful. He shook his head and said he was only doing what Lucas would have done for him. When he left, he walked quickly, shoulders tense, like he expected someone to call his name from behind. I sat on the bench a while longer. The wind made my eyes water. I was not sure if it was only the wind. I watched the river move, slow and steady, ignoring everything on its banks. I thought about how many people had gone through life like me, trusting that the systems above them were fair. I thought about Lucas trying to do the right thing inside a world that did not reward that. Back home, I called Angela and told her about the meeting. She said it was good that Jason was willing to share. She arranged a special way for him to send the files. She also told me that she had started to prepare some official steps. She said, in simple words, that we needed to create a formal dispute about the obligations in my name, and that we needed to raise concerns about certain company practices with the right bodies. She did not tell me every detail. She said too much information at once would only weigh me down. What mattered was that once these things were filed, they would sit in systems Leonard respected, but this time they would not be under his control. A week later, Angela asked me to meet her at the courthouse building. She said there were some matters related to the estate and to Noah's legal setup that she wanted to address. The courthouse was a large gray block with long steps and glass doors. Inside, the air smelled like paper and old coffee. People moved through the hall carrying folders and briefcases. In the main lobby, there were queues at several windows. Signs above them showed words like probate and family matters. The lighting was harsh. Voices echoed. I felt small again, but not the same kind of small as at Leonard's house. Here, everyone was small. Even the men in suits seemed smaller under the bright lights. As I waited, I saw a familiar figure at the end of the hall. It was Leonard's lawyer from the condo. He stood with a stack of papers in a plastic folder. Next to him was a younger assistant carrying another file. They walked up to one of the probate windows. I watched them hand over documents, speak to the clerk, get things stamped. I did not need to hear to know what they were doing. They were likely moving forward with their version of the estate and with plans around Noah's money and care. They probably assumed I would sign whatever they put in front of me later. They probably pictured me as a tired old man who would be grateful for any small piece they left me. Angela arrived a few minutes after they left the window. She was dressed in a dark coat, carrying a simple briefcase. She greeted me, then went straight to a different window. She took out several sealed envelopes and a set of forms. I saw my name on some of them, and Noah's name too. I could not see the details and did not ask. This was not a movie scene. There was no dramatic speech, just a quiet exchange of paper and signatures. When she returned to me, she explained in calm terms that we had now formally disputed the obligations tied to my name and that we had also placed certain requests regarding Noah's guardianship terms and financial structures. She said it would not change everything at once, but it meant that nothing could be finalized, at least not cleanly, without my side being part of the record. She added that she had also been in contact with someone from the company's internal oversight, a woman named Monica. With the files from Jason and the note from Lucas, there was now enough concern for them to open a deeper review. She said there would be meetings and calls. She did not promise that all of this would break wide open. She only said that the walls were no longer smooth for Leonard. On the bus home, I looked out the window at streets I had walked for years. My life looked the same from the outside. Same small house waiting at the end of the route, same grocery store on the corner, same neighbors' cars. But inside my head, the map had changed. There were lines now connecting days and names and numbers. A few days later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox with the company logo on it. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy paper. It announced a Lucas Kane Memorial Scholarship and Partnership event to be held at the company's main boardroom. There would be speeches, a presentation of a new family trust for Noah, and an announcement of ongoing projects in Lucas's honor. At the bottom, my name was listed among close family guests. Sarah and Noah's names were at the top, next to Leonard's. There was a note saying that after the formal part, there would be a closed session with selected partners and family members to finalize necessary arrangements. I sat at the table with the invitation in my hand. The boardroom. That was a place where I had never imagined myself. Angela called me not long after, saying she knew about the event. Harold had told her. She said this would likely be the moment where Leonard tried to lock in his version of things in front of an audience he cared about. She told me, in a slow, steady rhythm, that the steps we had taken were already in systems that mattered: the bank, the court, the company's own files. She said that by the time the event took place, certain notices and complaints would already be logged, with copies safe in places where no one could make them vanish with a click. She told me not to try to argue or fight in that room with raised voice. She said my power was in letting the facts and the formal steps speak. She said others would do the talking when the time was right. My job was to stand there, calm and clear, and refuse to be washed away. Over the next days, I prepared in my own way. I gathered all my papers into a single, sturdy cardboard folder. I put Lucas's note at the very front. Behind it, I placed the bank summary, prints of the suspicious documents, and a simple sheet with the timeline I had made. I added a small sticky note with the names of the key people: Angela, Harold, Monica, Jason. I wanted to be sure I could remember who was who if things moved fast. I also took out my best suit from the wardrobe. It was the same one I had worn to Lucas's service. I brushed it, checked the buttons, and laid it over a chair. I polished my old shoes until they shone as much as they could. The night before the event, I sat in my garage again with the light on. The tools on the wall cast thin shadows. In front of me on the bench was the folder, closed, with my name written on the front in my own hand. I looked at it for a long time. I thought about the first time I took Lucas to a work site, how small his helmet had looked on his head, how he had craned his neck to see the top of a half-built wall. I thought about telling him to keep his feet steady and his eyes open. Simple rules. Good rules for more than just building. Now, years later, I was the one walking into someone else's structure. I did not know exactly how the walls inside that boardroom would shift, but I knew I would walk in with my eyes open and my feet steady. In the morning, I dressed slowly. Shirt, tie, suit, shoes. I checked my reflection once. I did not look powerful. I looked like what I was, an older man in a plain suit. but there was something in my eyes that had not been there on the day of the service. I picked up the folder and held it under my arm. I turned off the lights, locked the door of my house, and stepped out into the cool air. The street was quiet. I walked to my truck, got in, and started the engine. The city waited ahead, with its towers and glass and quiet rooms where people made decisions they thought others would never understand. This time, I was going to be in one of those rooms. Thus, I arrived at the tower early. The lobby was busy, people in dark clothes moving around the big photo of Lucas on an easel. Someone had placed white flowers under it. I stood for a moment, then went to the desk, took my visitor badge, and rode the lift up with my folder under my arm. The boardroom felt like another world. Long table, glass walls, city spread out behind it. At the front, a screen showed Lucas's face and the title of the event. Sarah sat near the head of the table, Noah in a stroller beside her. Leonard stood by the screen, talking quietly with partners and board members. The event opened with soft music and a short video of Lucas at company functions. Then Leonard spoke. He talked about family, trust, and moving forward. He presented a plan for a fund in Noah's name and for new ventures that would carry Lucas's work ahead. My name appeared on a slide as a grateful supporter. When he finished, Harold asked to speak. His voice was calm. He said that before any arrangements could be confirmed, some questions about documentation had come up. He asked Monica from Internal Oversight to present her findings. She stepped to the front and described logs showing my name added to guarantees at times when I was never in the building and edits made after Lucas was no longer at work. She mentioned an internal ticket Lucas had opened about pressure and conflicts, then paused while the room absorbed that. Angela stood next. She laid copies of my real signature beside the ones on the guarantees and explained the differences. She said formal disputes and complaints had already been filed with banks and the court, and that any attempt to tie my house or pension to these projects would meet resistance on record. Harold then announced that, due to these concerns, Leonard was being removed from his roles pending external review. A few clients spoke up, saying they would not continue under Leonard's guidance. Leonard looked around the room, face pale, words caught in his throat. Sarah stared at the unsigned papers in front of her, one hand on Noah's stroller, the other frozen above the pen. I closed my folder without opening it once, placed my badge on the table, touched my grandson's small hand for a brief second, and walked out of the boardroom into the bright, echoing lobby.